Hi, everyone. Welcome to this International Youth Day panel discussion with African youth. This is just a snippet of some of the conversations that we've been having here at Debating Africa behind the scenes. We've been holding a lot of sessions with young Africans, talking to them about their feeling about what's happening on the continent, how they feel about governance, about their futures. And today, this is going to be a similar discussion with just a few of the young people that we've been talking about who are so impressive and have so many illuminating things to say about their countries and indeed Africa. I usually do the introductions, but because today I have every intention of our panelists to lead the discussion, I'm going to ask each of you to please give us your first name, your country of origin, and anything else about yourself, whether you're a student or you're an entrepreneur. Just a little brief introduction, please. Let's start with Tumelo.
Right. Good morning, everyone. I think a morning/afternoon. My name is Tumelo. I reside in South Africa, and I'm currently a student of politics at the University of Johannesburg.
Thanks, Tumelo. Eliud.
Yeah, thank you, Tandani. My name is Eliud Lutz. I'm from Nairobi, Kenya. I am an entrepreneur and really passionate about advocacy and upskilling of young people, of course, especially around entrepreneurship and
Thank you. Always good to have an entrepreneur. Ivan?
Yes, thank you. My name is Wema Ivan. I am from Rwanda and I currently live in Rwanda. I'm now focusing on self-development and I work with Aspire Debate Rwanda, which specializes in debate education and financial literacy.
I didn't realize you're with Aspire Debates. They are amazing.
Yeah.
We've had one of your colleagues on here, and he was incredible, very passionate. Okay, Elizabeth, hi. Introduction, please.
Hi, my name is Elizabeth. I'm from Ghana. I am an author and I'm a Master of Commerce student at the University of Cape Coast. So I'm majoring in human resource management. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you for joining us, Elizabeth. Very impressive area of study there. Best of luck with that. Okay, let's kick things off. Pleasure. Let's kick things off by talking about democracy. Some say it's under attack globally. This is a huge area of conversation, but obviously I want to talk about Africa. Is democracy as a system of governance thriving in Africa? And if not, what do you guys think are the challenges? Let me ask Ivan to kick this one off.
Thank you. In my opinion, I don't think of democracy is thriving, whether in Africa or across the continents around. First, there is no democracy when human rights are not respected, and when there is no freedom of expression, freedom of travel. You know, some people are just denied visas basing on where they are coming from without like an eligible reason. So I don't think democracy is thriving. And coming from Rwanda, we know, with a background touching on the history of Rwanda, where we had a genocide, some of the perpetrators who are in exile, the country requested for them to be brought to justice, but the countries respond in unreasonable ways. So I don't think the judicial systems are also working as they should. They are like biased or under some control, so which also does not define what democracy should be. So I think this also think that the need for political parties to be present in a country which is, you know, most of the countries, some are there just for existence or only in papers. So not to take a lot of time on this subject, I think democracy is not thriving at all, whether in Africa or across the continent. And in my opinion, I also think democracy should be revised as a whole, as it is, because it is very, I can say it is outdated considering the life we're living in, the 20th century, 21st century. And I think also what should be prioritized is education for the people to understand what is their role in a country before they tell them to join different political parties without actually understanding what those political parties are striving for. So other than prioritizing the education of the members or of the citizens, I think also sovereignty of countries should be respected. And that brings me to a point that says that democracy should not be globalized. If we are to respect the sovereignty of countries, then we also have to consider or to give respect to what the people of the country want as a mode of administration in their country. Because this has been on for years, but with the colonization that has been going around the globe, democracy has been made a thing that should be put in every country's administration system. But I don't believe that's what every country needs, basing on their culture or the values of the people. Thank you.
Thank you, Ivan. This is a sentiment that that's quite common in the focus group discussions, is the sense that perhaps democracy is not really suited for the African context. Eliud, I saw you nodding, smiling. I'm not sure whether you're agreeing or disagreeing. What's your perspective on that?
Yeah, no, thank you. Thank you. Probably I was smiling because I think Ivan had some very interesting points and I just loved listening to them. But of course, for me, I will benchmark more, share more on the Kenyan context, because again, that's my country and it may be different. I don't want to generalize to the rest of Africa. I may make a mistake if I do that. But let me just share something about the Kenyan context. I think our democracy as a country, I will put, if I'm to rate, I'll give it at 50%. I think democracy in Kenya has had its wins and losses. And of course, just allow me a few minutes just to clarify on, especially focus on the different elements of democracy. So when you look at, for example, free and fair elections, which is of course essential for, in any democratic process, I think one of the major wins that we've had as a country is that we've had independence of electoral bodies, and so our electoral body is called the IEBC. That's the independent body. It's actually an independent body. And so its independence as a body has actually been there. And so it has been in a position to hold free and fair elections. And of course, the citizens of our country are actually allowed to cast their votes in the general elections. And in most times, our votes actually are counted and they do matter. And so they actually inform the decisions that is made at the end of the debate in a general election or a referendum. So I feel that's a win. Just the fact that we can have an electoral process that is free and fair and elections are counted and the results announced, I think that's a win. But I think one of the losses I will talk about, especially on the free and fair elections, is when it comes to, because now in Kenya we have these parties and then we have party primaries before going to the main election or the general election. So most of the party leaders directly appoint party flag bearers in different positions instead of subjecting them to nomination by party members in the party primaries. And so of course the constitution really is not clear on that part. But so I feel like the people are not really allowed in most cases to participate in voting in the party primaries, but the general election is, I think that usually happens. When you look at active public participation, I think one of the wins of democracy in Kenya has been that facilitation of public participation forums that has been there, where of course views of people are actually collected. But of course the loss in that one is that I think there's usually failure in implementation of the collected views, or sometimes they take forever for them to be implemented. I think the other aspect of democracy that I'll touch on is the protection of human rights, which is, I think, the major win has been, there is really an improved understanding of human rights by most citizens in Kenya. So most people know, this is against the human rights, this is for human rights. And so that understanding, I think it's really improved. But of course, the loss on that side has been that relaxed enforcement by state organs, especially the Kenya Police, which is now the police force, which there is a bit of delayed justice for victims, and especially also by the judiciary and stuff like that. I feel like that has been a loss. I think the last thing I'll focus on this democracy question is the rule of law. And I think the major win for our country has been, there is a new constitution that we actually installed in 2010, which is very progressive. We love it because it introduced this aspect of two-third gender rule. So where we make sure that at least all genders, and especially women that have been conventionally left behind, are actually included in decision-making. There is also an aspect of devolution where power and governance is actually devolved to the different counties, like we call them. But of course, the loss on this one has been some level of impunity, especially by leaders who usually feel like, the law does not apply to them. So yeah, like I said, I think democracy, I'll give it at 50%. I think it stands a chance to build a better community through them. We stand a chance to build better communities through democracy. And of course, it has had its wins and losses so far. But I think we celebrate the wins as we build on as we try to work on the losses. Thank you.
Thank you. Very measured response. And it sounds to me like you're still optimistic about democracy as a system. Elizabeth, can I bring you in here? What's the situation like in Ghana? What's your perspective on democracy?
All right, thank you. So when it comes to democracy, I'll say it's more of everybody participating in what the nation is about. That is democracy in relation to the country or the continent. It's more about everybody participating, everybody having that right to participate regardless of age, gender, background, cultural background. Everybody must, be involved in it. But to a large extent, looking at Africa and coming down to Ghana, I don't think democracy is thriving here because there is no infrastructure to support a good democratic system yet. So like in most cases, it ends up being divisive politics, which is based on religion, the tribal affiliations, and then it brings in an unstable amount of corruption, which is detrimental to economic progress and sustainable development. So I'm not sure that Africa in itself has the foundation set enough for democracy, democratic governments yet. So looking at a situation like, in many African countries, we need focused leaders. We lack that at the moment, like focused leaders, as in people who really care about the people in the country. Sorry about the background noise. I'm sorry. Okay. Like people who care more about the country, the people, the citizens, and are interested in helping the nation develop. We realize that most of the leaders follow a particular pattern, as in, they are either trying to gather enough for themselves and their families, or it's sort of a connection between them and then an outsider where they're going to make, they are going to triple what is already in the country, but it's not going to the country's coffers. It's going to their pockets, which is not favorable for the entire nation. And yes, as they said earlier on, participation in elections, is it free and fair? It's not. In the case of Africa, a lot of African continents don't enjoy free and fair elections. It is more of they buy people's conscience with the money, they buy people's conscience with the talks. They don't allow them to willingly or freely participate in, events that would ensure nation building. So it leads to corruption being high in Africa. In most cases, that is the situation. So I personally don't think Africa, and we besides Ghana, is ready for democracy. It's not thriving here well. Thank you.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Very, very comprehensive breakdown there. Tumelo, I know you have a lot of thoughts here. Can you share them and give us a South African perspective?
Sure, but before I go to the South African perspective, I think it's wise to kind of look at the overview. So in preparing for this Zoom call, I kind of did a bit of research and I found an article by Freedom House, which was published in 2021. And they say that there are only 8 African countries that can be classified as free democracies. The 3 categories they use here, one being countries that are either not free, countries that are partly free, and countries that are completely free. So when we look at democracy as a whole, to kind of answer the question of whether or not it is thriving, if we look at those 3 categories, if only 8 out of 52 countries in Africa have a free democracy? The simple answer to the question, if it was a yes or no question, is that no, democracy isn't thriving. Majority of African countries still exist in a very partially free or partially authoritarian system of governance, which is kind of problematic in the way that we think of how democracy should be progressing, because it is now, and another article I found by the Council of Foreign Affairs Relations says that at this point in history, there are more Africans who are living under fully or partially authoritarian states than at any point in the past 2 decades. So democracy in and of itself is failing. So if I was going to take it to the sub-Saharan context, I would say part of the reason why democracy is failing is, I think I've said in the previous session, was because of like the dominant party system, which is to say that there is a party that we think is intermittently linked with the state. At the point at which the party isn't a part of the state, therefore there isn't like a rogue actor that is a part of the state that is not going to provide services, needs, or anything that constituents would want. So the harm of the dominant party system is that it kind of stifles any development for any opposition party to come up to try and reinvigorate that democracy. So democracy in and of itself is stifled. So that is, I think, an answer to like the sub-Saharan context as to like why there is a challenge of democracy in that. Moreover, if I was to take a general guess, a very general guess as to like why democracy elsewhere, like either the north, the east, and the west of Africa is stifling, I think there is a legacy of colonization that has kind of stifled the ability for African democracies to be tailored to the context in which they exist in. And I think because of that, because of like the colonial legacy that kind of splits people on tribal lines or religious affiliations, it kind of breeds a ground for conflict, and conflict does not allow for the democracy to evolve to include as many people as possible, because then democracy at the end of the day is for a select group of people. So that is like my brief summary as to the question.
Thank you, Tumelo. That was great. And I think, now that we've covered the system and the challenges of the system, I want to talk about the impact, like the human impact of it, because sometimes I feel like we talk about it in such broad terms and there isn't really a conversation about how this impacts one's life. I want to talk about the immediate effect of some of these things that are occurring in Africa, the big challenges. So we have food price inflation, lack of internet access, energy access, which we are certainly feeling right now in South Africa. It's been a brutal 3 weeks of pretty much persistent load shedding. Let's talk about what you guys are personally struggling with in your countries. I'm going to start with Elizabeth. What are the issues of governance, or the failures thereof, that are impacting you directly?
Okay, so mine would be resource mismanagement. I mean, amidst everything that is happening in my country, I think resource mismanagement is, at the basic level, it's really disheartening, because Africa has resources. We are rich in resources. We hear people say it, but the truth is we have a lot of resources. The unfortunate truth is that there is so much mismanagement on the ground. It's so sad. And that is what has led to the corruption that we are facing today. We don't lack the resources. We lack the right people in positions to manage the resources in a way that it would impact the whole country, and then to a large extent impacts Africa as a continent. So I did a little research, and it says that corruption is the main reason why resource-rich countries perform badly in economic terms. So the resources is in abundance. We need people who understand what is needed at a particular sector, how to allocate resources, how to apportion them to various sectors so that maximum use is made of it. We are in a place whereby the resources is in abundance, and instead of looking at ways to, spread it across all the sectors so that every sector can, work with what they have. A few people have, come into a consensus, and then instead of doing the needful to make the economy run, they are rather looking at trading with outsiders on the quiet, which comes back to the economy, but it's not going to the economy's coffers. So even though we have the resources and we have been told that we have the resources on the ground, there isn't much that we can see. And at the end of the day, what it means is even though we hear we have resources, there's always tax increment. Why? Because there is mismanagement at a point, and even if it is given out for use, just if you can account for what they have been able to do with it, it means the rest have gone to waste. And if it has gone to waste, it means somebody has to pay for the waste, for the loss, and it's boils back to the citizens. So for me, resource mismanagement is one big headache that is actually affecting Ghana. Thank you.
Thank you. Very well stated. Let's move to Ivan. Ivan, what is your perspective on this one? How are you directly impacted by, if at all, by some of these challenges?
I couldn't agree more with what Elizabeth just said. It was all on point. And I think one more thing that I have to emphasize on is the approach of governments on tackling the climate change. If getting more precise, I'll come to, Africa contributes 3%, yes, because it's less than 5% to the whole global contribution to climate change. But we experience heavy results of it more than the huge contributors. And for instance, today there is an ongoing drought and famine in East African region, such as Somalia, where there is like complete drought and people are really dying of famine, and some are trying to get away from the country to find food. So I think now if the governments could prioritize, and I again emphasize prioritize climate change to ensure food security, when people are satisfied, there are no such problems such as electricity, such as internet, because now the people have the power and have the energy to go out now and, if I can say, work for themselves. For instance, here in Rwanda, we have what we call Umuganda, which is communal work, where every last Saturday of the month, people in a certain community organize working to get, like they go to work together on a certain project that benefits the country, such as
Evan, I think you're having technical issues there. I'm just going to ask you to reboot what needs to be rebooted, and I'm going to move on temporarily to Tumelo, and we'll come back to you. Tumelo?
Yeah, I think you gave a pretty good introduction as like one of the issues that we face as South Africans with regards to like access of energy just in general. And I think what was interesting in like when I was looking up this question, because I was kind of curious to see what the rate of electricity was on average across like the African continent. And you have here that the average electrification rate of Africa is 24%, and the rest of the world is a lot closer to like 40%. And I think when we talk about energy access and access to the internet, and therefore access to opportunities and innovation, this stifles a lot of the development and access that like young people have to upward mobility that doesn't exist in already established like structures, like working at like a PwC or a McKinsey and Co. And I think this, and what happened rather is that before COVID, we were looking at like 74%, and then like no access to electricity, and then it went up to 76%. So what we can derive from this is that the effect of COVID has kind of stifled a lot of development in key areas for Africans, especially for young people in Africa to have access to opportunities. And moreover, if you look at like the rate of inflation, how it's made like just everyday spending and everyday living just almost inaccessible for most Africans. Petrol is almost around about 30 Rand a liter, and you have to go to a place of work and see, can I afford petrol or can I afford food? If cooking oil is almost 100 Rand, can I afford to buy this oil? Can I afford to make this, to buy this thing that allows me to kind of sustain my family, to kind of provide a living for my family? And the amount of money that you're getting paid isn't going up with the rate of inflation. So you have less, so you have to like buy the same amount with less amounts of money. So I think these are like for some of the issues that directly affect me specifically in South Africa, and like they're very like pertinent to my plight. Yeah.
Thank you, Tumelo. Eliud, I want to come to you, but I want to give Ivan a chance to finish his thought, because I was so fascinated by what you were saying, Ivan, about how if people are fed, then all the other issues resolve themselves, because then they have energy to actually get the other issues solved. And you were talking about this day that happens where everyone comes together to work towards the common good of the country. Can you just finish your thought there before I move on to Eliud?
Yes, I was talking about where the Umuganda, where people come on every last Saturday of the month and work on projects that generally benefits the country. I was trying to point out the benefits of securing all the benefits of making sure that there is food security in the country. Because when people, as I was saying, when people have food security, then everything such as internet access, energy access, then it is going to be prioritized, which at the same time will benefit the country in various ways. But the core or the solution that has to be put on the forefront of the agenda is food security. Because I was giving an example of Somalia or Ethiopia, where people are fleeing the country for survival. Now, who will remain in the country to tackle the issues that they are facing? No one. So the first thing that governments should put on the list is securing the access to food, and that is tackling climate change. You can get, there are lots of approaches you can use to tackle climate change, such as sustaining or protecting forests and yes, I was talking about sustaining forests, and also making sure that the water bodies that they have are also not contaminated. That is also ensuring the disposal of wastes and many others. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ivan. Eliud, I'm going to come straight to you. How are you directly impacted by some of these challenges?
Yeah, for sure, Tandanani, thank you. I think we share, actually in Kenya, we share some of the problems that my fellow panelists have actually shared, and I guess that's why we're in the same continent. But I think just trying to see and prioritize some of the top issues I would say top issues on our minds right now in Kenya. I think number one on the list has to be the high cost of living. It's really high. The food prices have gone extremely high. Like 3 months ago, I think, or about 6 months ago, the price of unga is flour for, just maize flour, was actually going at around 100 Kenya shillings. Right now it's costing 250 Kenya shillings. So you can imagine that's like more than a double of the amount. And definitely the salaries of people have not increased over that a period of 6 months. And this definitely makes it very hard to afford some of these things. So the high cost of living is really a major issue right now in Kenya. Of course, the government is blaming Ukraine for it, the Ukraine-Russia war, which we don't really think, the government should be prepared for such things. Of course, the other reasons the government is stating maybe the upcoming elections, because if you are aware, we're heading into an election on August, somewhere in August. And of course, this definitely also just usually the tension around an election in an African country creates that the investors kind of fear to actually pump in money into the system. So some of the reasons they're giving, but the cost of living is really high. Of course, the number two on the list has to be, there is this crisis, and this I feel it as a young person, because I also get to interact with young people on a daily basis. There's this crisis of schooling without learning. I'll just try to explain that. So there is this where, everyone is going to school, like universities are actually giving out graduates about 50,000 every year. And then these young people, of course, are getting out of universities, but with just the school, the name, they don't really have skills to actually land employment. And that's why the rate of unemployment, especially for fresh graduates, has been really high in Kenya. And this crisis of schooling without learning, I think, is a nightmare that some of the private sector, I think, is trying to work on. I think, of course, now that definitely also balloons the whole nightmare of youth unemployment, because these same young people are the ones that are now looking for jobs. They don't have the necessary skills, and definitely they end up being unemployable. I think the last thing I'll mention on this issue as a top priority in Kenya is corruption. And I think this has been there for a while now. Corruption is really bad. It's really eating into, the national cake and even the money that gets to the citizens. And definitely this means some of the services that we would have accessed, we are not able to because, someone somewhere ran away with the money or they embezzled and all that. So I think corruption is also a very, it has been a nightmare for a while, but we're just hoping that with the new regime that will come in after the election, probably things will change. Thank you.
Thank you. And I'm actually going to come back to you because I want to talk about this unemployment issue. It's our next conversation. There aren't enough jobs for Africa's youth population, and the system which currently exists, which I grew up being taught, was surefire of, get a degree, send in a CV, you will get a job. A lot of people are doing that. A lot of kids did get the degrees, they listened, and they don't have jobs. They're sitting at home. And you just spoke about it briefly here about schooling without learning. Is that the issue? And also, where are all these kids going to work? Where are the jobs? Where are the future jobs in Africa if it's not any longer that you apply and get a job? If governments aren't creating jobs, where are they going to come from?
Yeah, I know that's a very, it's a valid question. Where are the jobs coming from? Because I was fed the same lie while growing up that you will go to school or finish. So in Kenya, we call it the 8-4-4 system. So we're 8 years in primary school, 4 years in high school, then 4 years in university, then hope that you will actually land a job. But of course, to many of them, even me included, I've not been able to land a job through my, conventional degree that I acquired. And I have a very good degree, a degree in financial engineering, you can imagine, but still not able to land a job in Kenya. And that's what led, of course, when I started, I said that I'm an entrepreneur. Of course, that's one of the reasons why I just got into entrepreneurship, because I'm just like, yeah, the formal jobs are not coming through. But just to try to respond to your question, I think one of the challenges that our employment system and the education system has always been, and I mentioned it when I said, is this focus on subjects, I think, over skills. Because in primary school, we were being told the subjects, maybe sciences, mathematics, social studies and stuff like that. But again, now you get into the job market, then you realize the employer doesn't care about the subject or the unit you studied in university. They only care about the skill that you bring to the table. So I think we need to have a conversation around skills over subjects, and just, of course, what I called learning over schooling, so that just to help young people find something they are really good at and are able to implement on that. I think the other issue, and you also talked about it in your question, is this issue of where are the jobs? Now, the truth is, in Africa, and specifically in Kenya, the number of corporates are really limited. Now I'm talking about 50,000 graduates being churned out into the job market every year. But when you look at the number of companies that are actually hiring, very limited. We have very few companies, just to be truthful. And so where do we go next? I think, and this is from my own personal experience, and of course I keep encouraging this and just recommending this to the young people that I work with, is tap into the online job space. And I think the online job space, and in Kenya we call it the gig economy, I think it's really thriving, where you can access jobs from every corner of the world and work as long as you have access to the internet and a laptop or a digital device. You are able to access some of these jobs. In Kenya, the internet penetration is not bad. I think we are at 65%, just like electricity. which is not really bad. That's over 50% of Kenyans being able to access internet and electricity. And that definitely means the young people can tap into this online job space and this gig economy to convert, of course, these skills that they have acquired, of course, again, intentionally acquired, not necessarily through schooling, and convert some of these skills into income, and without necessarily having the conventional CV or a conventional degree certificate. I think the last thing that I would recommend as a way to just try to fight this unemployment nightmare in Kenya and Africa is, I think more young people need to embrace entrepreneurship. Yes, I know the conversation around entrepreneurship is usually very controversial in the sense that you can't expect a young person to start a business once they don't have the resources, they don't have the connections and all that. But I think I am a living example. I think it is possible as long as you have an idea which is good enough, convert the idea into a solution which can actually address a need in the market. That means it's solving a real problem. Definitely you'll have people come to need it and buy it, and that's how I think you're able to make a better living for yourself without necessarily having to depend on unemployment. So yeah, more young people really need to tap into the entrepreneurship space. And the good news is, with more young people into the entrepreneurship space, chances are, and this is very true, if I am a young founder, I am 26 years old, I've founded an organization, most likely I will employ other young people. It's very unlikely that I employ someone who is 50 because it will be very hard to manage them, right? And so with more young people in an entrepreneurship, it's not only just creating, of course, a living for myself and for my family and my dependents, but I think it's also creating jobs for other young people. And that's how I think together we're able to solve the unemployment problem. I think that's what I can say for now. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm so glad that you spoke us through that, especially because this is so real for you. This is not a hypothetical. It's not hypothetical. It's something that you've actually lived through. I want to come to Elizabeth. Elizabeth, you're getting a good degree. How are you plotting to maneuver your career? Are you going to stay in Ghana? What are you thinking in terms of your career trajectory?
Well, when it comes to career, I'm thinking deep about what you just asked, because there are opportunities here. In all earnest, there are opportunities here, but they are limited. So even though you have the degree, maybe you performed well in school better than other people, they have funny requirements. You just came out of school and you want to apply, but they're telling you that you should have a minimum of 5 years experience in the role. I mean, come on, you just came out of school. It doesn't make sense. It looks more like people are interested in employing people they already know or have already been in the system. They are not willing to give the young people a chance. Even though this person just came out of school, let's give the person a try. Let's see how well the person performs. Probably the person is good. The person needs a bit of training to, level up. They don't think about these things. It's more about who you know. And unfortunately, the who you know people who don't really know the role. So they end up getting employed and then they mess things up. And it becomes a cycle because they keep bringing in people just like them. They don't want competition, so you bring in the caliber of people that they can control or suppress, and that's how things would run. In my case, being an HR, I have had the opportunity of working with a game company here before. I was very new. I had gone into intern, and the man was like, "This the CEO said he found me special in terms of someone who is in school, and education system in Africa in most parts is more theory. So for me to be able to come to the field without training and be able to do something that extraordinary, he wants to keep me. So I ended up working with him. But the problem is that there are restrictions, limitations. At a point, what comes in next? Are they going to keep you? For how long are they going to retain you? the pay aspect, is it equal to the effort you are putting in? What are the working conditions? Are they favorable? Are you being used more than how much you're being paid? You factor all these things in, you weigh it, and you realize that probably you are being underappreciated, so you have to move. So if I have an opportunity to work here in the field I am currently in, I'll definitely take it. But I'll look at the terms and the conditions attached to it. Sometimes on the paper it looks very attractive, but you get to the field and you realize that I can say it's work. So yeah, that is it for me. But I also push upgrading because HR is not a place that you can really rely on. We are in the 21st century. There is always technology, something new coming up. Now HR is moving more from the traditional way to the digital aspect. If you don't level up, very soon you just fall out of rope. And Ghana is nowhere near it yet. So as I'm leveling up, as I'm upgrading myself, if I have to respond to an opportunity out there to go and then do more, I think I'll just take it. I'll take it. Thank you.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Thank you for that answer. And I'm so glad to hear that you're being strategic about your career, but you also touched on some of the things that have also shown up on South African Twitter, where organizations will advertise for an entry-level job and want 5 years of experience, or want a car or a laptop for an internship. It's just some of these practices that really restrict access to the workspace. Dumelo, you were nodding very like you're fully nodding when Eliud was talking about digital jobs. What are your thoughts on this?
So before I build on the what he was saying about digital jobs, I think it's important to kind of build on another thing that he touches on, which I think is very interesting, which is the fact that in most African countries, there's a lot of sporadic development, which is to say that there are a lot of central hubs of opportunity. You can go to Johannesburg, Sandton, Cape Town, and those are the only places that kind of have access to opportunity. That already says that if there are 50 people at the University of Johannesburg studying accounting, 100 at the University of the Witwatersrand, and then also another 100 from UCT who are all studying accounting, they all have to come and fight for the 20 positions that are open for entry-level people, which I think is something that I think when we talk about sporadic development, we only have areas, these certain areas that are developed, and these areas, otherwise you kind of stay at home with that degree and you don't have access to opportunity, right? Because I think that's an impediment that we face. So with regards to information technology and what Eliud was saying, I think it's important to firstly note the 5 biggest job sectors in Africa right now are agriculture, infrastructure, the service industry, and information and communication. The reason I value the information and communication industry, I think it's an important thing for young people to look into, is that it is the only one of the 5 that means that you can kind of break into with the most sustainable way of creating an income. Conversations I've had around my friends are ones in which we try and learn a programming language, just like JavaScript or Python, because that means to say that you don't have to break into a McKinsey & Co. You don't have to be at Norton Rose. Is that you can have a way of actively getting sustainable income based on the skill set, right? And I think the skill set is something that the world is already moving towards, right? We're becoming a far more globalized and digitized economy. Having a law degree or a degree in mathematics doesn't really help as much. But if you can code, if you can become a data service engineer, that means to say that you will always have access to opportunity, always have access to jobs, and therefore, if you have access to jobs, you can make a living. So I think one of the areas in which Africa can develop is with regards to information technology. Naturally, this is impeded by the fact that most people don't have access to electricity and internet. But if we can empower young people with that ability, it means to say that a lot of them can kind of break out of the system of either going to a tertiary learning institution. We can maybe break out of that system, and you can have more young people who are making an income as opposed to having a degree that means nothing and staying at home trying to look for jobs that you are either overqualified for or underqualified for. I think so. That's why I was nodding a lot, because I agree with that, because I think that is the way moving forward. It has to be, because in order for us to be competitive, we have to look at what's happening in other developing countries and also in the West. And traditional jobs aren't as predictable and dependable as they used to be. So we have to kind of tap into where the market is leading us into. And I think it's leading us in the direction of information technology.
Thank you. Beautifully stated. Ivan, I'm so interested to find out what you think. Rwanda is a completely different place, and the issues there I found in these conversations, they tend to not mirror so much the ones of other African countries. So it'd be very fascinating to hear from you what you think the jobs of the future will be, and how you plan to navigate your career as a Rwandan.
Yeah, thank you. I think I completely agree with everything that has been passed on this subject, what Eliud, Tumelo, and Elizabeth shared. With the coming generations where electricity is on the forefront of our lives, then we have also to digitalize our careers. But what I can add is we also have to normalize breaking the culture of mediocrity, where you know that after being born, you have to go to school and then find a job. It's not necessarily, not everyone was born just to find a job. So as Eliud said, we should also encourage the entrepreneurial culture and also modify a little on the education system. The reason why people are sitting at home with useless degrees is because some of them like have a civil engineering degree, but in all over the course of his or her education have never been to a site where they are actually practicing what he or she did in school. So we should also try to modify the education system and bring in more practical courses than theoretical. And also, yes, the entrepreneurial thing, the entrepreneurial culture should be also encouraged. And another thing that, you know, most of the people or everyone go to looking for a job just to earn more money and see if he or she can survive. But at the end of the day, it is what you do with the money that you have earned. Whether little or too much money, even though I think there are never such a thing as too much money. But what you do with the money is what counts. So I challenge every government to encourage or to involve financial literacy in their education system, because at a point you can earn millions, but someone who earns thousands lives a better life than you are. And I think for a country to prosper, the happiness of the citizens should count, and that comes with the standards of living, which is primarily why people look for jobs. So I encourage and I challenge governments also to encourage or to involve in the education system financial literacy. And I think that will probably, also enhance the entrepreneurial culture. Thank you.
Thank you, guys. I had prepared so many questions and we're already nearly out of time because of this conversation has been so amazing. But I'm just going to give you guys one final question, and if we can just answer it in 30 seconds so that everyone can get to their next meetings, that would be great. I'm just going to leapfrog all the way to the final question. What makes you proud to be an African? We've spoken about the challenges. I think we've given people a lot to think about in terms of jobs and security and governance. Let's talk about what we are proud of and what makes you excited in terms of innovations, trends, whatever that's coming out of Africa. Eliud, because you have to head out quickly, let's start with you.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, I'm usually an optimist. Probably by now you know that, because I always feel there is always a brighter side to everything. Mm-hmm. But I think just even the optimism aside, I think there is real evidence that suggests that it is the right time for Africa. And this is because I think Africans, and this I've noticed especially in Kenya, and most of the young people I interact with across Africa, they have stopped waiting for governments and international bodies to come to their aid and probably solve their problems. I think we have moved away from that. And so what we are seeing is this new generation of thousands of change makers that actually are coming up almost every year. And they are spearheading this whole movement of change in their communities. Of course, they're doing this by creating solutions to existing problems mainly. So the solutions are usually tailored as social enterprises, which of course from fintech, that's financial technology systems, to, digital systems. All these are just geared towards one, making sure that they include the excluded, and of course, they also serve the underserved communities. And I think this is what makes me proud to be in Africa today, just being able to see these young people create these solutions, and of course, not wait for the government or international bodies to help. Of course, if they come through, well and good, but we're just like, before they do that, we can come up with solutions to our own problems. And of course, like we always say, we Africans, we believe that, and I think we say this in an organization that I'm part of called Africa Matters Initiative. We say we are the ones we've been waiting for. And I think, and I personally believe that since we, the Africans and the young people specifically, are closest to some of these problems that we've talked about, I think we also are definitely closest to the solution. And so it's just that we have to stand up and actually take action and create these solutions. And I think that couldn't make me more proud. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And I love that saying, we are the ones that what is it? We're the ones we've been waiting for.
Exactly.
It's gorgeous. Tumelo, quickly, talk to me.
Okay, I'll be quick. Similar to like Eliud, because I've done some work with Africa Matters. I really do like the sentiment. I think it's an amazing sentiment. But I think one of the reasons I'm proud to be an African is that our history is not a pleasant one at times. It is not one that kind of bores a lot of happiness. But beyond our history, we still try to stay resilient and determined, and kind of try and celebrate each and every bit of diversity that happens. There might only be 52 countries in Africa, but so many different tribes, languages, just people, just almost a mecca of where the human story began. And I think that's something to be exceptionally proud of, just to be brief.
Thank you. That was perfectly said. Ivan?
Thank you. First of all, I'm proud of where Africa is now comparing to where it has been. In a few years, there has been a great change in a little time. And as a person who likes challenges, I also like that Africa is undermined, but considering the fact that we have the youngest generation compared to all other continents, I can see that Africa is the future of the entire world. In a few years, they will have to depend only to Africa, and I can't be more excited to have now the whole world eyes on Africa and being part of the solution. Thank you.
Thank you. It's always a pleasure talking to the Aspire Debate, guys. Yeah, I need to visit you guys and come chat to you. There's a common attitude there that I love. Okay, Elizabeth, talk to me. What makes you proud to be an African?
Okay, so a lot of things. I mean, first, the word Africa itself. I mean, if you think about Africa, it's a place that is home. I call Africa home. It's warm, it's welcoming. Amidst all the negativities going on here, Africa is home. I mean, compared to other places, to a large extent, I think, waking up as an African, being able to go to your farm and, eat freely, I mean, it's a blessing. People elsewhere have to always queue probably, or have to go and buy before they can eat. I can own my own house here. In other places, I'd have to, use a mortgage to, get a place or something. I think even though the situations don't always favor Africa, the kind of people we have here, we have a rich culture, and we have people that we can, collectively rely on. We can call family, and it's a blessing in itself. It might sound small, but on the ground, it's very deep, and it makes me proud to be an African.
Yeah. Thank you, Elizabeth. That was beautifully stated. Thank you to our panelists, Tumelo, Eliud, Ivan, Elizabeth. It's been such a pleasure. I am so excited for your futures, and I'm so glad that you joined us for this panel. Have an amazing rest of your day and a beautiful weekend. Bye, guys.
Bye. Thank you for having us.
All the best, guys.
Bye.